Welcome to Global Voices, the official podcast of the Center for Socially Engaged Theatre at the University of Regina.
Hello, welcome to Global Voices, the official podcast of Center for Socially Engaged Theatre, University of Regina. My name is Shola John, and I will be discussing with the director of the center, Dr. Taiwo Afolabi. We will be discussing exciting topics around research, networking, immigrant experience, and professional development. Dr. Taiwo, you are welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Olushola John. Thanks for being here as a researcher at the center. And I'd like to acknowledge that our podcast today is happening on the territory of the Anishinaabe, Dakota, Lakota, and the homeland, and Nakota, and the homeland of the Mischief and the Mischief Nations, where the center and, of course, the University of Regina resides. I also want to acknowledge Gabriel Friday, who is behind the production. There is one of our grad students at the center. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Doc. Can we get to know more about you? Introduce yourself to our listeners.
Absolutely. So my name is Taiwo Afolabi. I am originally from Nigeria. I arrived in Canada 8 years ago, 2015 precisely. And I am today the director of the Center for Social Engaged Theatre. I am a Canada Research Chair in Social Engaged Theatre, and I'm an associate professor here at the University of Regina. I have had the opportunity to work in over 20 countries across 5 continents in different capacities, from being, a theater manager to leading, to being in festivals, to running different committees. And finally, I'm also an artist researcher. And what that means is that I have the really opportunity to practice theater, specifically apply theater in community, and using theater to focus on things that are pertinent and important to community, and then use that to inform my research and my writings and my practice.
Interesting. So, how exactly did you come about the idea of the center?
Well, thanks for asking that, Dr. John. So, when I finished my PhD in 2020, and the opportunity for this job came in, because have I had my own theater back in Nigeria, Theater MC International, and also here in Canada. I've always been somebody that loved to create systems to work, or a platform, as it were, to do the kind of things that I want to do. And so I'm thinking, when that opportunity, came, I'm thinking I'd love to create something where a hub, a research hub, or later on I conceptualize it as a linkubator, a place to connect people and idea together to do the kind of work that I really love to do. And I know we're going to go into the weeds of the kind of the research that we do. But beyond that, though, is that a lot of the time, because of the nature of the work at the center, we're working particularly on issues that are important to communities, that are very time sensitive. The urgency is there, and also we want to collaborate across sectors and across different disciplines. It was important to create something that can bring people together and be able to do that across those various spaces. And so I just went into that mode of saying, what does that mean if we have a space that could then house all of my Canada Research Share program together? And then that's where we are today, the center as the space that houses all of my Canada Research Share programs and activities.
So, how do you get to combine what you do as a lecturer with the research you carry out at the center? Again, do you have sort of geographical limit for the kind of research you carry out at the center?
Well, I always say that out of the thinking at the center, and we always say these all the time, and I tell my grad students all the time, we want to think globally, but we also want to act locally and personally. And of course, like I said at the beginning, I've had the tremendous opportunity to work in over, X number of countries across, 5 continents. So obviously my work is very international. With that being said, I think that it's our work is very place based. That's one. That means that we pick an issue, for example, issue of climate change or issue of policing, and we're looking at what does that mean in the context of here in Regina? What does that mean in the context of here in Saskatchewan? What does that mean in the context of the prairie the region that we find ourselves. And if you then look at all the projects that we're doing, from Future Prairie Theater to Art Leadership Program to equity, cultural policy, equity and cultural policy to theater and immigration, and the list goes on and on and on. The reality is that there is a connection to where we are, a place based of here in Regina, in Saskatchewan, and of course in Canada. But also to come to add to that also is that with me personally, I carry multiple borders. I am Nigerian born. I'm a Canadian. I have connections and network all over different places, and it's also important for my work and the kind of things that I do to really speak to that international, if I may, or that global sense. So that means that I'm interested in collaborating with my folks in Brazil, or those in Cote d'Ivoire, or those in the UK, or in Senegal, or in South Africa, or in the US. All right. So I think that, which then that's what I'm saying, that we want to think globally and constantly want to find our way, find our space within that global context and within our local context. So so my response to your question is yes and a no. We have geographical limits, but at the same time, it's depending on the project, right? There's some project that we're looking at, the global south, global north, pole, right? What does that mean? And there's some projects that are very, very local. We're looking at critical issues pertinent to where we are. So that's what I mean by it's very place based. And at the same time, we're thinking globally, and we're trying as much as possible to envision what does that mean globally and what does that mean locally and ultimately personally.
Thank you. It's interesting hearing you and some of the works you have done. I've read some of them, and some of our works are available on the website of the Center for Socially Engaged Theatre, University of Regina. We have it in podcast form. We have them as research report. You could just go there and then download some of these reports, and then you get to know more about what we are talking about. And just in case you need to get in touch with us, you are free. You have our email there and the contact on the website. Recently, you were inducted into the Royal Society of Canada. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, what does it mean, and what impact will that have on your career?
Well, before I answer that question, I'd love to first of all say that, to really acknowledge that I am standing on the shoulder of giants. I have mentors, I have mentees, because myself I'm being mentored as I'm mentoring other people. I have people, I have organizations, individuals, groups, communities that are in one way or the other, directly or indirectly, invested in me. And so I just want to say that, first of all, because a lot of the time our system is built upon, pedigree of individual. And really, I do believe in my own culture, like we always say, it takes many trees to make a forest. So one tree cannot make a forest.
Sure.
And it takes the community or the village to raise a person.
Sure.
So I just want to really strongly highlight that. That's the first thing. In terms of the Royal Society of Canada, it's, really appreciate the opportunity to be inducted into the College of New Scholars of Sciences, Arts and Social Scientists, I believe. And in terms of the impact it's going to have on my career, honestly, I'm, congratulatory messages have been pouring across the world. To be honest, from Africa to Asia to Europe, of course to North America, of course to South America. I'm really amazed and humbled, and really appreciate everyone's congratulation. I've not taken the time to think about that question, to be honest. And I would just say that think that because of what the Royal Society of Canada stands for, obviously to be connected and to be inducted into that would bring some level of recognition and pedigree and all of that. But I really don't want to focus on that, to be honest. What I want to focus on is to ask myself, how can we as a community engage with that? How can that help me, to better support my students? How can that help me to better support the sector, the theater sector, the creative industry sector, whether it's here in Canada or in the US or in Africa and other spaces? That's one. The other thing, that's the first thing. The other thing for me is also, I'm really asking myself, what does, how can these help me to constantly ask myself about the ethics of my work?
Okay.
Because a lot of the time, as beautiful as these things are,
Yeah.
they are part of a particular system.
Okay.
And it's really important to ask myself, what does that mean, right? I'm not trying to build empire here.
When you say you're a part of a system, you talk about the university system,
Well,
or the theater ecosystem.
Yeah, well, not just only, not even necessarily even the theater ecosystem. Of course, I'm part of theater ecosystem. But the system in terms of Royal Society of Canada is part of a system.
Sure.
The University of Regina is part of a system. As an associate professor, you're part of a system. All right, as a Canada researcher, I'm part of a system. So
Sure.
there are many of these, these layered connections to the system. Not, and I'm asking myself, what how can I use these opportunities to critique the status quo, right? To question, to raise different questions, to ask ourselves not just only what we're doing alone, but also how are we doing what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing. So for me, I think at this point, and maybe it's still at the early stage, these are the questions that are kind of running through my mind.
Okay.
Without doubt, I believe that it would add some certain level of privilege, obviously.
Yeah.
And I don't know to what extent, obviously, but I'm really hoping that it can be, a fruitful venture,
Sure, yeah.
and that everyone connected to me can be inspired.
Okay.
And all of that.
Yeah, I think the inspiration is a major thing. Okay, to be inspired to work harder, to be inspired to attain to the peak of one's career, and to also network at a higher level. But then, if I may take you back, what has been your experience in the academy as an immigrant in Canada? It's easy to celebrate the successes, but I like to hear the stories. I like to hear the background. I like to hear the unknown. What has been your experience?
Yeah. Well, I'll answer that question by starting to note that one of the research clusters that we have at the center is theater and immigration, and we're looking particularly into issues of belonging, identity, and all those kind of fun stuff. And that really came out of my PhD when I was looking at the immigrant experience as an internationally displaced person or people, which is refugees and internally displaced persons. And I won't go into all of those details.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, particularly when we hear the narrative of many governments and policies that are anti-immigrant. It's like they've come to take our jobs, they come to do this, they come to do that.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time we don't think about whether people come voluntarily in the context of me. It's voluntary
as a student.
Started as an international student in a grad program, and then the rest is a story. Or to those that are that don't really have a choice. Like those that are from displaced zones. And I think that the narrative of scholars, of refugees taking or of immigrant taking people's job and different things like that, I think it's not an apt narrative. In fact, research has shown us that there's so much immigrants actually contribute to the economy. When we look at history, whether from the world of tech to the world of academia to the world of business and entertainment and all that. In fact, in a particular region, a particular country, immigrants are driving it. My point here is that I think that the first thing first that all of these has sort of brought me to is to really acknowledge those that have come before me.
Okay.
I was part of a panel some couple of years ago, and I did say that if I came here 20 years ago, maybe I won't have all these opportunities, right?
Exactly.
It's possible. and there are many people that came that they are, they were very versatile. They had all the pedigrees in their countries, but by the time they got here, they didn't really, the Canadian system just made them,
They favor them.
they favor them, right? And so I really want to, to really acknowledge that really sincerely from the depth of my heart,
Yeah.
that we're really standing on the giant shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
The second thing also is to really then say, what's my responsibility in changing that narrative, in making people and organizations to see that, no, I think that immigrants are helping here. Immigrants are supporting the system. Immigrants are forging path here.
Sure.
All right, we're not boarding, right? And so I think that's really very critical. Whether people go back to their country, whether they do not, and all of that, those are, everybody determine things by themselves. But I think we need to have a change of narrative here, and that's the second thing. The third thing also is that, from my own experience, is that each one would, each immigrant at the end of the day would have to determine what they want for themselves, the path they want to follow for themselves. People immigrate for different reasons, whether it's for economic, whether it's for family reasons, and all of that. In fact, interesting, one of the projects that we did on Future Prairie Theater, one of the key questions we asked in that project, and really shout out to my partners, University of Calgary, Professor Christian Brubaker, and one of my mentors, Yvette Nolan, and of course every other person on that project. One of the key questions we asked was that in this context, it was very local. We're looking at the prairies.
Sure.
Why do people stay on the prairies, or why do they leave?
Okay.
And different people have different reasons. They leave. They come here because of family. They come here because of how cheap it is. The less expensive economic condition and all that. It is the same thing for immigration, right? For immigrants, some people leave because of family. Some people leave because of economy. Some people leave, because of their lives and different things like that. But that ultimately, that each participant in this process of immigration, if I may use that term, would then get here and start determining that path for them. But it won't be easy.
Sure.
I'm not, and like you rightly said, there are a lot of stories, and there are obviously time to share that, but that we can stay committed to that and contribute our own quota to the entire thing.
Great. So, of all the jobs available, why did you opt for the classroom? You have people in the tech, you have people, you have people in different fields. Why did you opt to go to the classroom?
I was having a joke with my other brother this morning. I'm like, the industry that I find myself, it's not for profit. I'm just it's not gonna give you money.
So teaching is not for profit.
We're just having the joke, but it's true. Because it's not gonna make you rich. And I think right from the onset, I've been very inquisitive person, very curious. I always love asking questions. If as a matter of fact, I wanted to actually study journalism, because I was in mass communication, rather, because I was interested in asking people questions. Asking and asking and asking.
Yeah.
And on this my trip to Brazil, I remember one of the students that was, when I was doing my sessions at the University of Rio, one of the students was like, "My goodness, you ask a lot of questions." And I said, "Well, that's what I paid to do." And so natural, so that's that. And for me, asking question, and then going, not just only reading books to find answers, because that's valid, but I want more. Like, ask questions to people that are having not just only the lived experience, but are having that are currently living the experience, or that will live the experience, right? And so it was, I kind of noticed that with me right from the onset, and really grateful to my parents and to my family, that, I grew up in a from a very humble background. We were not poor we may be poor in terms of economic, means, but we're not poor in terms of love, ideas and all that. And so support and all that. So they kind of fostered that, that I just kind of gravitated towards the academia. Now, to shock you though, when I was doing my PhD, I had to do odd jobs, right? And so shout out to those that are, frontline workers, those that are working in the hospital, in, care homes and all of that. Because I had to do some of those things myself just to make ends meet and all that. That's a story for another another day. Speaking of immigrant experience.
Yeah.
But to answer your question here is that those are the things that kind of propel me to move towards research, towards the classroom.
Okay.
And then I'll say finally, then this might take us to the next question. I read Paulo Freire very early. Very, very early back in the day.
Yeah.
And also the other books that I did read, Zig Ziglar, Peace Power. My father had a library, like a very active library. He would always, we have to read.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of exposed to all those great ideas, like what are your strengths, what are the things you love to see, make vision, plan for yourself for 5-10 years, all those things.
Yeah.
Now we were doing some of those things, and I know some people might find them problematic and all that, and that's another debate. But those things kind of help to say, okay, these are my strengths, these are the things I love to do. And then, and I find and then I started building strategically, so that I don't, I always want to be an active participant in my own,
your own story.
My own story. And then I started building that strategically, and then I'm really grateful that I'm here.
Well, interesting.
You have been listening to Global Voices, the official podcast of the Center for Socially Engaged Theatre at the University of Regina. For more details about the center, visit www.cset.ca.